This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast. We have a busy show for you today, and joining me as always, and I am thankful for it, is Pam Hill, victims advocate, pharmacist. She's sadly experienced violent crime in her own family, so she brings a unique and valuable perspective to a lot of the crazy cases that we talk about here on Gulf Coast Confidential, and we do have some pretty crazy ones for you today. Our main episode, before we get into the ones that we're going to tease for you a little bit, the main episode today is on this case out of Colorado. It's so tragic. These three young men basically thought it was fun to throw rocks at cars, and they ended up killing a young woman. In fact, police said it was the equivalent of having a cannonball shot into her car, straight into her skull. So both of these, I should say all three of these suspects have now been sentenced for their role in this crime. So we're going to talk about that case here in a few minutes. But before we get into that, we got a couple of others that we're looking into for you as well. And Pam, I think you ought to pick it up from here.
Right there, okay.
Yes.
Okay, let's see where we want to start here. Let's start.
What about Jeff Knight, since we're in the keeping of Florida man stories?
Okay.
This is out of Clearwater. This guy, y'all, I don't know if you followed our little conversation about, is it Brock, the charter boat captain, who's the best effing charter boat captain in all the world, y'all.
Right.
All the world.
Don't you forget it.
That's right.
I think he forgot it.
Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, it's probably his business is sinking as fast as his reputation.
Right.
But this Jeff Knight guy, in keeping with this sort of, I do what I want, I say what I want, when I want, this is interesting, out of Clearwater. He ran into a ferry, killed a person, injured some others, and has basically accepted no responsibility for it and is running amok, if you will, allegedly.
Right. And he just kept right on going. It's like hit and run. And nothing's been done to him, but as things go on, looking into the things he's done in the past, because he's a entertainment mogul and he just does what he wants. He does what he wants to women. Remember I told you there was a woman that he was, quote unquote, I guess, hanging out with. He just reached over and licked her face.
Good Lord.
Remember I told you about
Yes. I mean, all I can think about, this is post-COVID, man.
It's
you
crazy, man. But anyway.
All the more reasons to wear a mask. You're not even worried about things you can't see floating in the air. Just some stranger with a yucky tongue.
I guess, I don't know. But anyway, we're working on that one for the fall.
Yeah, that's a good one. So that'll be Jeff Knight. We want to thank my friend Mike Danke. He commented on my Facebook page about that case. And that was a good one, Mike. Thank you for turning us on to that one. It's got a lot of layers to it. So we're looking forward to diving into that. I didn't know he was a music mogul, so that's even more fascinating.
Like entertainment, the venues.
Yeah.
There.
And, we really don't have to leave the great state of Florida to find a lot of cases to talk about. Here's another one that we're watching.
Right. This is Florida lady or Florida woman. Let's just say woman. She lost her lady card with this one. Poinciana, Florida. This is 53-year-old Kiva Lark, and she is an assistant principal. And she basically, there's a 13-year-old boy at her school, and he got in trouble. He's throwing some paper, just some paper. He just threw some paper like that. So he got sent to the office, and to her. And she said, well, since you don't have anything better to do with your hands, she said, rub my feet like you love me.
Oh, my gosh. This poor little kid.
Yes,
and he ended up rubbing her feet, didn't he?
Yes, she put her legs across his lap. And see, she had been calling him sexy chocolate in the hallway.
Poor little guy. This is unbelievable. What world does this lady live in?
I'll tell you, it's kind of a kinky world. And so he wasn't doing it right. So she reaches over on his arm and shoulder and says, do it like this. She said, I'm doing you a favor. I'm teaching you about foreplay. So when you have a girlfriend.
Oh, my gosh.
And that's not all.
She's out of touch with reality, not to mention
no doubt.
A pervert, in my opinion.
Right. Well, she scolded him, and then later when it got told to the police, she's, I was just joking. like that. And they're like, no, no, no. She said, well, I was also doing it kind of to humble him. And, boys have fantasies about teachers, so I was just trying to help him.
Oh, my Lord. She's the one that's fantasizing.
Yeah, so this is another person in the Brock Horner School of What Not to Do. And my favorite sheriff in the whole universe, planet, galaxy, Grady Judd. He's down there. He put a picture of her up like this and said, hey, rub my feet like you love me. That's what the assistant principal told his boy, right here.
And it's not funny, but when I did watch that video of Sheriff Grady, and he is just so entertaining because he's right on. I mean, these people don't really deserve the respect of,
no.
I feel so sorry for that child, and I hope that hasn't scarred him.
I'm pretty sure it has, though. I'm pretty sure something's going on.
He'll never look at feet the same.
Right. Well, so now she's on administrative leave, and then they're looking in to see what in the world. This lady has a master's degree. See,
not in common sense.
No, but that just tells you when people start acting weird and wrong, and I think people in authority think they don't have to tell anybody anything.
Well,
you do.
Exactly, and not to be thinking like a prosecutor, but if they get caught doing this once, how long have they been doing it? And,
right.
And, it's almost like water droplets. It builds up after a time, and you think, well, they haven't noticed so far. Next thing you know, you got a puddle that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And she doesn't think that she's done anything wrong by the fact that she was like, oh, I'm just joking.
Right.
Who else has she done this to that hasn't either complained or she hadn't gotten caught?
Right. Well, a little girl was in the area too, and she heard it also and saw it even, and another teacher or administrative type person there, and they are like distancing themselves, like, no, this is because there's your child. Those are 3 or 4 things that are unacceptable to say to a grown up.
Yeah, I'll say.
Much less my 13-year-old son going in there.
Rub my feet like you love me.
Like you love me.
Man, ugh.
Let's be done with that.
Yeah, and this last one before we get to our main episode today, this is just awful in every single way. And I feel like this is just also indicative of the world that we live in now. Almost like you're tapping into something, mining for oil in the ground. And instead of mining for oil, people tap into a vat of hate and find so many other people that just will climb on board their hate train with them.
Or just unacceptable behavior. If people act like the way this lady acted, if they act like that out, imagine how they act in their house.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is basically a case that is out of Minnesota, and a woman is accused of using the N-word, and it's now in a viral video. So this man recorded her. She was basically saying that another child was an N-word, a child.
5-year-old.
Where the child could hear. So how did all that come about?
Well, Miss Shiloh Hendricks, she's a blonde-headed lady, had her little baby on her hip, and she's yelling out that N-word at a 5-year-old child because she said the 5-year-old child is getting in the diaper bag and taking her son's stuff. And I don't exactly know what it was, but I imagine it was a toy or something. Kids walk up to stuff all the time. And
sure.
Is your first time ever going to a playground with a kid, regardless of what color or what age or
well,
what
it sounds like that just sits right here in her chest, and she just couldn't wait for the opportunity to let that out.
She said that to him, and this child was Somalian, and his parents were there, but they had some other children too. You're not. She's got her kid on her hip. Apparently,
she's like a Karen,
right.
It sounds like.
It sounds like, and I hate saying that because I love a bunch of Karens. People with the name Karen.
Me too.
I wish it was called something else. She's a Shiloh. And that ruins it for me because if I had children, I was going to name any girls I had Shiloh or Shiloh.
I have a friend named Shiloh, just as sweet as can be.
All right, good. Thank you. Because I love that name. But anyway, she got there and she's yelling, and this other man, Somalian, he's videoing her. And he goes, hey, did you just call this little boy the N-word? And she said, I'll call him out for what he is. And that made that man mad. And she said, while we're at it, and called him that a bunch of times, and then gives him the finger and then kind of laughs at him and shows her teeth or what have you, and just kind of keeps it going with him. And he's like, do you not know that's hurting him? And she said, well, it's about to steal my son's stuff. Well, anyway, things go on. And she decides, because it goes viral, he posted it. She decides now she's been doxxed. Social Security, and doxxed means all your personal information gets put out on blast. Her Social Security number, where she lives, a bunch of stuff about her. So she turns this around and goes, let me use this horrible incident I caused for my financial gain. I am starting a GoFundMe, and I don't think they let her do it, but she went to another crowdsourcing that they say is Christian aligned there. I don't know if that's true or not.
That's sickening if that's true.
Right. So I've got to look into that, but it's like the GoFund or something like that is another one.
A different sort of GoFundMe, and she's raised $600,000 upwards. Now, that was at last count. It may be closer to $1 million.
Right. That's her goal, is $1 million. She said, because we've got to move now, and I can't live here. My exercise place has been exposed. My children don't want to go to school, which I hate that, but that's the mother acting a damn fool, And so all this is going on, and so I started looking down through the comments. How did we get here? How did we get here? Who's donating to this? And people are saying, Hitler's friend, or they're saying, you do you, boo. You say what you
and
want
another
to.
one that said, quote, I hate blacks are among those who are helping this woman.
Right. And then, free speech is free speech, but hate speech is hate speech.
And that's what I'm saying. Like the fact that she could so easily tap into so many people that are willing to get behind her on this. It's just so polarizing. And I feel like to a great extent, you and I were talking too, we had another incident here in Pensacola where several teenagers, 5 or 6, basically were also on video, filmed themselves harassing a homeless man that was on the local railroad tracks, at a popular place called the Graffiti Bridge. It's where everybody paints messages all the time. And, whether it's just for happy birthday, happy anniversary, or a cause or something, they're always often there. But these kids were there apparently at night, and they're claiming to the police that this man was threatening them, but the police said there was absolutely no evidence of that, and certainly not on the video. But they corner him. One of the boys, they're minors, they're teenage, high school age. One of them throws a drink in this homeless man's face. Then another one punches him and knocks him out. And the police say these kids didn't say why they recorded it, and apparently they have said that they were acting in defense of themselves. But there is a game called the Knockout Game, and teenagers across the country have done it to homeless people as well as just regular folks walking down the street. And homeless folks are regular folks too, but I'm just saying people who are not homeless.
Right.
But at any rate, it was so sad, but it got me thinking about how dehumanized we have become in this society, especially, I don't know if it's partially being online, what the case is, but I feel like that's what happened with this situation too, with this whole crowdsourcing and fundraising because she wants to feel entitled to just run around and call toddlers the N-word. And now she feels persecuted because she's been outed. It's like people don't have any meaning anymore. They're just reduced to labels, whether it's a political label or a racist label or just something that is ugly, good, bad, or otherwise. People are just labels as opposed to humans with feelings and thoughts. And, there should be accountability for doing something wrong. And people do probably get carried away by putting everybody's information out there on blast, because that can hurt an entire family who's not necessarily responsible for one family member's actions.
Right.
But at the same time, who are all these people donating all this money?
I don't know. Some person donated like $650 and she was identifiable to some people, and other people are like, done. I'm done with your business. It's the dumbest thing in the world. Even if you aren't a good person, it's dumb for your business. But whatever happened to this lady's taking her own inventory and go, wow, that's a new low for me, calling children names. Why would you call any child any name? But that's her little thing. But then what she does in classic fashion of it's not me, it's always all y'all people, anybody. So she goes to look him up and finds out he might have some little infractions in the past. Well, then people look her up and find out she's got infractions and stuff. And I won't say what they all are, but I will say one of them was for brawling. That's an old broad type of thing.
I was about to say she's a brawling broad.
So, calling children names. And then as things go, this turned the corner and went around to Carmelo Anthony, the track thing that went on with Austin Metcalf. So we'll talk about that later. This has a lot of research we've got to do in this, but it's just so sad. How did we get here?
I know. I think going back to that dehumanizing, which is to me important in this day and age. And I think it also goes to show that people just don't, it's easy to attack someone if you've not talked to them or if you don't hang out with, whether it's gay people or transgender people or people of a different race or people of a different ethnicity or people of a different religion. It's easy to believe stereotypes and it's easy to reduce somebody to a label, is my opinion anyway.
It's so awful because being different is so fun.
I know. I certainly enjoy it. But yeah, and it kind of ties in, segues rather into this next case that we're we're talking about our main topic today. It's a sick prank, basically, that went terribly wrong. When they were just teenagers at the time in Colorado, they decided to terrorize motorists by launching landscaping rocks into cars. They denied that they were targeting people, but they weren't going after parked cars. They were going after cars that people were driving on the road, and they had hurt quite a few folks. And again, going back to the dehumanizing part, I guess they just decided that these weren't real people that were driving these cars. They were just cars that were driving themselves, was their defense, in my sarcastic opinion. But basically, they hit 20 cars, shattering glass, and those who weren't hurt were terrified. But by far the worst incident was one involving 20-year-old Alexa Bartell, a young woman minding her own business with her whole life ahead of her, when these three young men took aim at her car with a 9-pound landscaping rock taken from Walmart and hit her squarely in the head. It shot through her front windshield, and basically the impact was such that it caused her skull to explode, and not even her mother was allowed to see her again after that murderous moment. So if you are triggered by that, I apologize. We do want to warn you. That's about as graphic as it gets, but that is what happened to her. And it was just absolutely awful. And these kids, instead of rushing to check on her because her car obviously went veering off the side of the road, instead of checking on her and seeing if she needed help, they cheered each other, and one of them even took a selfie with her car crashed in the background. That's why we're calling this episode Rock Throwing Joseph Koenig and Gang Punished for High-Speed Murder of Alexa Bartell. This was just so unnecessary. My heart just breaks for her family. This all just went down. Koenig was tried. The other two made plea deals, but the victim's family got a chance to speak when they were all sentenced. But Koenig hasn't been sentenced yet.
Right. Yeah, Alexa Bartell, 20 years old, beautiful, beautiful brunette hair, pretty teeth, healthy, and 20 years old, has her little girlfriend. She works at a place with her mother, and then her girlfriend works at a restaurant. So she's just planning an evening to go home after she's gone and visited her girlfriend at her girlfriend's work.
Gotcha. So she's on the phone with her girlfriend, too, when this happens.
Right.
And the girlfriend's the one that found her and alerted her mom. She said, we were talking, we got cut off, now I can't reach her. So they basically tracked her by her cell phone and knew immediately that she was gone. It broke my heart listening to the mom talk about reliving that moment and how she got there and the paramedics were saying, no, you can't look.
Yeah. And right then, that hurt so much, but I know they wouldn't even let me see Sharon because she was unrecognizable too. And people tell me that have pushed against that they wish that they never did because you can't remember that person the way they were. And poor Alexa, like you said, the rock went through her face, unrecognizable. Her skull was empty, and as they call it, biological matter was all on the inside of her car. That means that, and if people are sensitive, don't listen. And this is what the prosecutor said. Her brains were in the back seat.
Bless her little
heart. And they
heart.
have to go. We've got Joseph Koenig, and he's got two partners in crime. He's got Zachary Kwok, I think it's the way you say his last name. And then we've got Nicholas Mitch.
Carol Chick,
yeah. Got those two guys. Well, Kwok was kind of the odd man out there.
He was the most recent friend in this little friend group. The other two had been, Koenig and Mitch had been tight for a while.
Right. And so they kind of would do this stuff. This went on on 3 separate nights, and it was on 10 different events and stuff. It may have even been more than that they were doing. But anyway, they called this their little habit. Yeah, this is their little, I know.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, too, that the defense attorneys were basically saying they didn't mean to kill anybody. Their intent was just they didn't have anything else to do, better to do, so they were out there playing these terrible pranks. But you had some details on some of the other incidents. Like a rock ended up in somebody's lap at one point.
One of the guys that got hit, he was an Uber Lyft driver, and he was in a minivan, and he was going to pick someone up. And then I don't know how it all works or everything, but business is business. And he said he saw a fare that was going to pay more. So he blocked this one off. He said some word like that, like basically gaffed it off and went to this one. And then in the mix of that, a rock comes in through his minivan, and he basically is taken out from going to the next fair too. But it was big chaos. He called the police and stuff, so that starts a lot of this. Then there was a man with a 13-year-old in the car with him, and he ends up with a rock in his lap. Then there was a lady named Eleanor, who was a poetic type creative writer like you are. And on the stand, she was saying, she was telling about it. And you have to listen to it if you want to hear her describe it. And I mean, she was factual, but she would say things like, the pain wasn't salient to me in that moment. And this is how she talked, And then she was having to drive home. They said, well, why didn't you call 911? She said, I couldn't. I have one hand on the wheel and one hand on my neck because the rocks and the glass from all the filaments from the windshield, she said, I was taking glass out of my ears and eyes and mouth and body for days. And she drove to her family's house because she said, I need help and I can't call. So she drove and walked in her house, and her mother and stepdad were like, she said, I knew by their face I was awful. But she had to get in the shower with her clothes on because the glass was so impaled on everything. And I mean, she
was like a human pincushion, and the glass had stuck the clothes to her body.
Yes,
Good God.
It messed up her face.
Bless her heart. Wow.
So there was story after story after story of that. So all those things they were doing, and you got to be the dumbest dum-dum in America or the world to say, I'm throwing, the rock was a little bigger than that softball there, they say. And then the physicist in me, because that's what I was going to be if I wasn't a pharmacist, the physicist in me realizes they are going 103 miles this way because Quack said he could see the odometer from the back seat. And by the way, Quack had a headache and he had a sinus infection and he had his head down on the the back seat there, and he was playing a game because he's doing everything he can to put himself separate from that. But all these things are going on. Then they see Alexa's headlights. They're headed south, she's headed north. And so they see her headlights. They don't know who she is there.
She wasn't targeted because of who she is. She just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But these dummies realize that they're throwing something 8 pounds, and it's
9 pounds, apparently.
And something that's concentrated. Like, it'd be better to throw a whole boulder because everything would have split out. But they throw that, and they think it can't hurt someone or break someone. They said that Koenig had he liked to smile and smirk, and his favorite thing to do was whoop, whoop, and smile real big at them and stuff. And they're like, are you effing crazy? Even the other two are like, what's going on?
Yeah, apparently he shot put it into the windshield because he's left-handed, and that was easy. And one of the other friends, I think it was his buddy Mitch, set the rock there so he could throw it. Helping him get armed, if you will.
Oh, yeah, he put it there. He said, I reached between my legs and got it, and I put it here, he said, because we kept them in the floor well there. And then, see, this was, they think they're brilliant. I'll drive because I'm left-handed, and I'll shot put it out on somebody, and if you're shot putting out, a window's that high, a human being's behind the driver's wheel, and then this old man over here decides, well, I'm right-handed, I'll just roll my window down and toss one over because, this is athletics, I reckon, and so this is the craziness, and the SWAT, whatever his name is, Zach in the back is sitting there, saying, I don't know, I just knew he was going 103 and it was cold and I had a headache, and you should see them all scatter when it's time to get punished. The two, but Koenig wouldn't take a plea deal. The other two did.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting because that's where the rubber met the road, if you will, because they wanted to find out who actually threw the rock that killed Alexa. And initially, Mitch was saying it was Zach that had done it because he said he was, quote, like a brother to Joseph Koenig. And then both of them, Mitch and Zach, ended up taking a plea deal, and then they both testified that it was Joseph Koenig who threw the fatal rock.
Oh, yeah, because Koenig's smart. He's the manipulator. He told, and Mitch is kind of the weakest of the bunch to me. He's telling him, oh, no, we go to our graves about this, and we're blood brothers, and whoop, whoop, and all this stuff, and this boy's buying into it. Zwock had a little more sense to me in the back. And then reading, I find out there's another man, the fourth man, and his name was Joseph Bopp. Well, because they had all picked each other up or going to go play pool like people do. That's innocuous enough and fine enough. This is near all them in high school. Well, he decides, he goes in the bathroom at Walmart while they're picking up all these rocks. He comes out and goes, these must be some losers, man, right here. He said, take my ass home.
Thank goodness. Wow, smart kid.
He said, Koenig always chased chaos. And he said, this is when their mischief kept going. Became
malicious.
Right.
Yeah.
Became murder.
Murder and malevolence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they did all that. And Koenig just doesn't have good judgment. So this happened 2 years ago.
Or just mean.
Yeah, or just an idiot, card-carrying idiot. And then, my opinion, alleged. Okay.
He's charged with idiocy in the first degree. Yeah.
Per Pam.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to claim manslaughter and stuff. But in the usual, the NGI, not guilty by reason of insanity, came up in here, and they did mental test on him.
Oh, they did? Koenig tried to plead not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yeah, and he had some personality disorders and some terrible judgment and terrible impulse control. Duh.
Yeah. So do most criminals behind
that's
bars.
Right, that's right. But I want to say 1 second that the girlfriend of Alexis, her name is Jenna Griggs, and can you imagine being on the phone, and she just saw her at work, they're just in love, she just knows that Alexis going to her house, and so she's watching her in real time because I'm fixing to get off, and I want to see my girlfriend go there, just happy, just trying to have a good time. So anyway, she's watching her, and at work she gets in trouble for not sweeping the floor good enough, and she's like, I got to roll my silverware. You know how it is when you're a server. You got to do all this stuff before you go home.
There's a lot of prep work you got to do.
So she's doing all that. She's still watching her, and then she's talking to her later, and when she gets off work, and the phone goes dead. It just goes dead, not a hang up or anything. So she starts looking on Find My Friends on iPhone, and she sees she's off in a field. So she gets scared, so she starts headed that way, and she calls Alexa's mom. And Alexa's mom goes, I'll head there, call 911, because when she sees her, she has to call 911, because she drives her little Kia out there and to the little yellow Chevy Spark out there, and she can see things are horrible. The phone, I think, is out there, and a rock with some blood on it and stuff. And then after that, it's all the lights and the emergency services and stuff. And I will never forget seeing that when I turned the corner to my sister's house.
Yeah, because on some level, I imagine that every family is praying that isn't true. They're praying that the worst has not happened.
Right.
And then you round a corner and there's the crime scene, if you will. There's all the emergency responders, and everybody's running around not just to save a life anymore, but to document evidence because of a crime.
Oh, yeah. And they see the family and the friends coming up. And I mean, they keep it as unchaotic as they can, but you've never gone through this before. You've never had the loved one of yours dead on the other side of the door or in a car, and then everybody else comes up and doesn't know what's going on. It is the most horrible moment of her life. I pray nothing ever is more horrible for that. And her mom comes up. Her mom does like my mom, falls on the ground. I mean, this is just what people do. You will always remember that moment. Always, always, always. You'll always remember where you were when you find out your loved one is dead, and you'll always remember what people said to you during that moment.
I know.
So I think of all that and think about how these men, went down the road and they were like whooping and said, oh, they looked back and saw the taillights. We got to go back. They went back 3 times, one time making sure to get a photo, so they put on Snapchat to share with everybody. And one of them said so valiantly, well, I deleted it. Get out of here.
Why would you take it to begin with? That's what I'm saying. It's so sick. It's you just can't look at that and see anything else but this. They've dehumanized these people. They just about their pleasure. This is fun. This is like a real life video game in a way. We're just going to drive around and see how many points we can get, proverbially for smashing somebody's skull in, essentially.
Oh, no, just taking their whole life. Well, between when this happened on the 19th and the 26th when they got arrested, this county was the nation
trying
was
to
upset
find
about it. Yeah, because I remember hearing about it. And so that during that week, Zachary Zwak, he ends up going to prom. We see a picture of that. He goes snowboarding. We see a picture of that, and Alexa's dead. Alexa's mother, girlfriend, family, aunt, all of her friends, and the people that got hit. And now these 3 want to act like this is a habit or a prank.
I know. That's terrible. Let's just take a quick break before we get into more of those details about what happened and how police realized that these three were responsible not just for her death, but also these other incidences, including one that they ended up being charged with attempted murder.
Right.
Thankfully, nobody died in that incident. But, you know, accidents happen when you least expect it. And I do want to give a shout out to Zarzar Law, Joe Zarzar, personal injury attorney in Pensacola. We are appreciative of his support with Gulf Coast Confidential. He takes on the cases that are difficult, that give the voiceless a voice.
Right.
And we are certainly appreciative of his hard work and taking on and representing some of these difficult cases, including a woman who lost her husband during a medical malpractice where a surgeon removed his liver accidentally instead of his spleen and then tried to cover it up. He's also representing a case which came to mind when you were talking about the Uber driver that was impacted in this particular rock throwing case. I mean, we had a case here in Pensacola where an Uber driver was apparently drunk, and that's the accusation, pulled out into traffic, injured a motorcyclist, also injured his passenger. And Joe Zarzar is representing that passenger and said, thankfully, because of insurance that's related to Uber, that if the Uber driver is at fault, then the insurance will cover any injuries that were sustained by the passenger as well as another person that may have been hit, in this case the motorcyclist. But he did bring up, if the driver had not been at fault, then Uber's insurance would not have covered these things.
Oh,
so
wow.
Good to know.
Yes.
And also thank you so much, Zarzar Law, for being a valued contributor here on Gulf Coast Confidential as well.
Definitely.
Yes. All right. So moving back onto this case, police did find these three suspects. They did realize they were connected not just to Alexa's case, but to other cases as well. And that's why they were also charged with attempted murder for another rock throwing
Right.
incident. So I'm so thankful that they were able to catch these guys. But the fact that they were working so hard not to be identified,
Oh, yeah.
but they couldn't help themselves, word got out because they'd been talking about it.
Right. And I think the fourth man, Joseph Bopp, I think this guy had a conscience and knew that all this is ridiculous and mean, because he was a good guy.
Yeah, thank goodness. Well, they were all charged with first-degree murder, but then, like we talked about earlier, Kwok made a plea deal. I think he pled to second-degree murder as well as second-degree attempted murder as part of that agreement. And then same with Mitch, Nicholas Carroll Chick. He was sentenced to 45 years in the Department of Corrections, followed by 8 years of mandatory parole. And Kwok got 32 years for
Right.
his plea deal. And the other one, Joseph Koenig, that was the big iffy one, you know, because they made that plea deal and then they all agreed, yes, they testified that Joseph threw the rock through the car. When they tested that rock for DNA, hers was the only DNA on it, which hurts my heart to even think about that. But that's why they needed the other guys to be consistent in their account of what happened and who actually threw it. So he was tried and after 11 days convicted of first-degree murder. So I know that had to bring, hopefully, certainly not peace to the family, but just some, you know, at least you get closure knowing that the person who you believe is responsible has been held accountable.
Right, some sort of justice. And I think the other two, besides Koenig, may have, I think they did have some remorse. But to me, it's always so interesting to watch all this hoop and hollering and the machismo and stuff out in the streets. And you're sitting on the stand in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, belly chain, ankle cuffs, and you're whimpering.
I know. And I tell you what, it just hurts my heart too, because they've ruined their lives as well as stolen Alexa's life, who had everything to live for, everything to look forward to. 20 years old, just starting out in life. And these young men were teenagers at the time. Now they're 20 years old, the same age she was when they took her life. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, they knew what they were doing was potentially dangerous. And I thought that was a good point that basically one of the prosecutors made, said even if jurors were unconvinced that Joseph Koenig, for example, through it, she told them they should still find him guilty of first-degree murder as a conspirator because they knew that what they were doing could hurt people.
Right. It didn't matter who threw it, because the other two obviously were smarter than Koenig because they took the responsibility. All three of them were there. Any of them that wanted to rear up and not take responsibility could get this life in prison without parole.
Right. And I thought it was interesting, too, that Koenig's defense attorney argued that he had borderline personality disorder and it affected his impulse control and judgment. And I thought that might be a reason, but that's no excuse.
Right.
That's certainly not a defense.
Right. He's not dumb. He knew what he was doing. And it's just so interesting to me how our judicial system works, and that you can roll the dice if you want to, but if you want to hear a good prosecutor, tune into this case and listen to the lady prosecutor in this case. Victims We have to have a voice. We have to, like you and Joe, and even this show. This is why we do this show.
Right. I know. And you and I were listening when Alexa's family got up and spoke at their sentencing, because essentially it was their chance to give their victims impact statement. I know that you're very big advocate of being able to do that. It gets your voice on the record as to how it's impacted your life, as well as just lets people see the victim as somebody other than just quote unquote the victim. They were a person with a life, with people who loved them and cared about them. And now not just her life is gone, but all three of these young men will spend years, one of them forever in prison, most likely. Joseph hasn't been sentenced yet. That will happen June 3rd, but the others are going to spend decades in prison. That their life is going to be behind bars from here on out. It's changed everyone, but I am so thankful. And it was heartbreaking to listen to her girlfriend speak and to listen to her mom speak. And I know you can certainly relate to how they felt.
Definitely. But it's your chance to speak, and you will regret it if you don't.
Yeah. So, we'll see what happens with Koenig. His sentencing is June 3rd. He faces a mandatory life term for his murder conviction. And it sounds like with somebody with poor impulse control, maybe that's a safer place for him to be for society since he has been convicted. But Pam, appreciate you joining us as always on this episode.
Thank you.
And we thank you so much for joining us. That is it for rock-throwing Joseph Koenig and gang punished for high-speed murder of Alexa Bartel. We appreciate you listening in on our Gulf Coast Confidential Conversations. I'm your host, writer, and producer Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks as always to our director, editor, and production engineer James Roy. Remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential Conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. We would just love it, though, if you'd like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.